In case you didn't know, Bernie Sanders is incredibly popular. He just drew in 1.1 million live viewers for a town hall on Medicare for All, and he's constantly polled as the most popular politician in the country. Now, there's a discussion out that he may in fact be running for president in 2020. Now, I know this isn't really a surprise to anybody. We sort of expect him to run, but now there are actually discussions happening behind the scenes between Bernie Sanders and his aides. As reported in Politico, Bernie Sanders convened his top political advisors in Washington on Saturday for a planning meeting that included a discussion of the feasibility and shape of a possible 2020 presidential campaign. Half a dozen senior Democrats familiar with the gathering confirmed to Politico. Along with Sanders, participants in the meeting included 2016 campaign manager Jeff Weaver and Sanders' wife Jane, called in on the phone. Nina Turner, the Ohio State Senator turned president of Our Revolution, Sanders' post-campaign political organization, was there too. So the meetings are now happening, and it appears there's at least that intention for Bernie to run in 2020. Now, I'm glad that Politico mentioned that Nina Turner was there, which isn't all that surprising, but I do think she is an incredibly important piece of the Bernie Sanders potential campaign in 2020. I think she was his most important surrogate in 2016, and I think she continues to be the most important voice in the progressive movement other than Bernie himself. And that's why back in January of 2016, when I first launched this channel, I did a video on potential VPs that Bernie Sanders could choose if he were to win the Democratic primary. And I put Nina Turner at the top. And finally, at number one, who do I think would be the best choice as Bernie Sanders VP? Former state senator from Cleveland and top Ohio Democratic Party official, Nina Turner.
Change will happen.
My videos have thankfully come a long way since then, but I wanted to show that because just as important as I thought it was for Bernie Sanders to pick Nina Turner back then, I think it's just as important now. And I actually think that in terms of strategy, how he could do it or should do it, if he were to pick Nina Turner, and I know there are people out there that think she's not even, she's not even in government right now. She's running Our Revolution. But at this point, it doesn't matter. Nina Turner is a voice for the progressive movement, and she represents a section of the movement that gets often overlooked, which is people of color and women in general. There are many progressives that are simply not represented in Congress, and Nina Turner represents that. Now, you could say that, say she doesn't run, say Nina Turner doesn't want to be involved that deeply in the actual presidential race. She doesn't want to be VP. She'd rather be president of Our Revolution and actually try to elect candidates to Congress that are progressive. Totally. I totally get that. So then, who could be a VP instead? And I know this is super early. This is 2018. We're talking about 2020. But you know what? There's been so much negative news lately. Let's just have some fun for a minute. So step aside. Let's imagine who could potentially be on a winning ticket with Bernie Sanders. If it were not Nina Turner, then I think it should be Barbara Lee. Now, Barbara Lee is somebody who really doesn't get mentioned that often, but she really should. She is a strong progressive voice in the House, and she was the lone vote against the invasion of Afghanistan, a vote that was taken just 3 days after the attacks of September 11th.
However difficult this vote may be, some of us must urge the use of restraint. Our country is in a state of mourning. Some of us must say, let's step back for a moment. Let's just pause just for a minute and think through the implications of our actions today so that this does not spiral out of control. And I came to grips with opposing this resolution during the very painful yet very beautiful memorial service. As a member of the clergy so eloquently said, As we act, let us not become the evil that we deplore. Thank you, and I yield the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman's time.
The only person to vote against that, the invasion, was Barbara Lee. So, and she continues to sit in the House as a member of Congress for California. So, she's somebody who you can't really level the same criticisms on like you could say Nina Turner, because Nina Turner, yes, she's not in Congress. I guess you could say that is a detriment to her ability to maybe be VP and potentially one day be step in as president if she needed to. But Barbara Lee has that experience. Barbara Lee is in Congress, and she is a progressive, and she represents the same voting bloc that Nina Turner does. So even apart from all that, this is what I think Bernie Sanders should do if I were advising him, and I'm not, but if I were, this is what I think he should do in running up to 2020. I think he should actually pick his VP before the primary even gets started. So that gives you a better idea of the team you're voting for. Because we all know what Bernie Sanders represents, and I think by 2020, the vast majority of voters will know what Bernie Sanders is about. But it's unfortunate that the very fact that he is an old white man works against him. It just does. So if you have somebody else on the ticket with him before the primaries even get started, somebody who is a representative of another voting bloc, that yes, it is important to have somebody of a person of color there, somebody who represents women. I think it's good to have somebody like that on the ticket with you before you even get started into a potential run. So, or into a potential presidential run. So that's what I think. Whether it's Nina Turner, Barbara Lee, or somebody else, I think it's smart to pick the VP before the primaries. Now, there are, of course, other Democrats that will run as well. Now, Politico also gets into that. Over 36 Democrats are currently considering running to challenge Trump, making the potential primary unpredictable. But if Sanders were to opt for a run, the field would likely shape itself around him, and he would find himself a target, as it might also for his fellow co-favorites, former Vice President Joe Biden and Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren. Now, this paragraph got me brainstorming about what potentially could happen in a primary race where the field is actually shaped around Bernie Sanders. So the political piece here seems to intimate that he would find himself a target. Now, if you're running against Bernie Sanders, I actually think it would be stupid to try and negatively attack him. It's going to be really hard for anybody to try and put their record up against Bernie's. He has a record that dates back to the 70s of him being consistent on these progressive positions. So if I were to give some advice to people running against Bernie Sanders, and hopefully they're not listening to this because I don't want them to have this advice, but if I were to give them advice, I would say you should actually adopt Bernie's message and then speak about how you would be a better face for that message than Bernie Sanders would. Now, I don't exactly know how you would communicate that, but when it comes to the actual policies, the vast majority of people in the country, everybody, support the progressive policies that Bernie Sanders supports. Things like raising the minimum wage and raising taxes on corporations and on the wealthy. These are issues that the vast majority of people agree with. So anybody running in 2020, any Democrat running, needs to adopt that progressive message. The only way you can tweak it is how you make yourself seem different enough than Bernie Sanders in terms of how you may be able to better defeat Trump in an election if Trump is still there. Like, this is so far off that it's really hard to predict what the race will actually be about. This could be a race against Mike Pence. And I mean, if that's the case, I think anybody could win. And really, I don't think Trump is going to have, unless Trump does a complete turnaround in terms of the policy he supports, I don't think he's going to have much of a chance in 2020. Now, I know some of you will say you're under, your expectations are too low of Trump and he could totally win. He won last time. Yeah, but people are now awake. And voters, Democratic voters, or voters in general, non-voters, will come out and vote for the person that is going up against Donald Trump. Because simply of the way Trump has been. Trump has woken people up to politics. People that haven't voted in years. So it's highly unlikely, especially seeing all the elections now and seeing people like Lee Carter in Virginia, a socialist, win a race against a prominent Republican in the state. Seeing that type of thing happen, it's incredibly unlikely that Trump is going to have the same energy behind him that he had in 2016. So, where was I? So, if you're running against Bernie Sanders in a primary, then you should still adopt a progressive message. Maybe just put a different face on it. But he's the front runner. If Bernie runs, he wins. I really don't know who could overtake him. There just isn't that much fervor for anybody else, and nobody has the same track record that Bernie Sanders has. There are people, you can attack any one of these people on many issues. So here are the potential people that might be running against him. So Joe Biden. There are countless things you can attack Joe Biden on. I mean, simply the way that he awkwardly touches women on stage. That is simple enough. But Joe Biden has been consistently with Wall Street and corporate interests, and makes himself appear to be with the people when he is not. So Biden's an easy target. Elizabeth Warren she kind of lost a lot of support among progressives for not supporting Bernie Sanders in the primaries. So look, I have no issue with Elizabeth Warren if Bernie doesn't run, but if Bernie runs, there's just no comparison. Other potential people, Cory Booker. Booker's ties to Big Pharma and Wall Street. Kamala Harris, who didn't prosecute Steve Mnuchin. This last one, who I just saw today and it made me laugh out loud. John Kerry, considering presidential run in 2020. There is absolutely zero chance that Kerry gets the nomination. Zero. He couldn't beat George Bush. Why John Kerry is thinking about running in 2020 is beyond me. There are much better people to run than John Kerry. So this field, while it is deep and there are many potential candidates, there's no competition. There's no real competition for Bernie Sanders. Now, his opponents might try to paint him as somebody who is out of touch with certain segments of the population. There are people that will try to call him or his campaign racist or sexist simply because he is a white man. But that is exactly why you need strong progressives like Nina Turner and Barbara Lee to be in his corner and be there fighting for him on the issues and show that, look, just because Bernie's a white man, an old white man, it doesn't mean that he doesn't represent me or my values. So, I don't know. It's fun to get out of the current world and try to imagine what life might be like in a few years running up to 2020 and the power of the progressive movement. Will it have grown by then? Will 2018 be a bloodbath? Will progressives be taking over seats that no one thought they would win? We're going to find out. I think they will, but 2018 will show if the momentum really is there. And if it is, it will absolutely carry itself into 2020 and beyond. So just some fun stuff to think about. Let me know in the comments who you think should run in 2020. I expect to see a lot of Bernie Sanders comments there. And if Bernie Sanders does run, who should be his VP? Let's just have some fun. Let me know in the comments.